I know your mother was a journalist, and she wrote for Modern Screen and some of the other what we call
Hmm.
movie magazines of the times. When you were growing up, were you a writer too? And when we were in high school, I didn't know this. Did you want to be a writer? Did you want to follow your mom?
When I was a little girl, I was a writer. When I was in high school, I was a cheerleader. I tried to have that identity. I think you and I talked about this. I would sneak out on Sunday and go to black churches. I really loved Ray Charles and Aretha. I wanted to be a different soulful person, but I wasn't a writer in high school. I did not join the school paper. Came to New York after Berkeley, and started working for a hip little magazine, like they used to have at the end of the 60s, and then became a writer after that. And I'll quickly say I did like write a lot for Ms. Magazine and for the women's magazines, where in the old days, if you had a mother who was a writer, they could get you with a publicist and you could get cover stories very easily, which of course has not been the case for 35 years. But I really became a journalist when in the late 80s, my close friend's best friend was murdered by her husband. He got the children. He was a violent, very wealthy man. We became an activist to try to get the children safely taken care of. And we looked at the impossible, crazy custody law. And I wrote a book about her and the whole thing, the marriage, the murder, the custody case. And that really got me into being a journalist. And then right after that, there was another wife murder that happened in LA, and it was O.J. Simpson and Nicole. And I was sent out to do that book, and it was a big bestseller. So I kind of just became feminist journalist on custody cases, wife murder, sexism, all kinds of
And
things.
music. And
And
music.
music, yes.
You wrote a book called Girls Like Us with three of my favorite. I
Yes,
still have all of their albums. Talk
yes.
to us about how you did you love them as much as I did in our era?
Absolutely. I wanted to write a book about our era, Hawk, the female side of our era. We were born in mid to late 40s. I want to be careful about that. We were little girls in the most repressed, constricted, obnoxious time when women kissed refrigerators and television commercials, when How Much Is This Doggy in the Window was the hit. We were 4 years old and 5 years old when this was going on. So there was nowhere to go but up. Then came the birth of rock and roll, came the civil rights movement. We were little kids before that happened. So much changed. And what being a female was changed. Guys were always supposed to be adventurers. We decided, slowly and surely we would become adventurers. After we didn't want to get married after college, we went out and did crazy things like, going on drug rampages and going around the country and going to foreign countries and having different boyfriends and living like adventuring guys always did, and then came back and we're middle class again. I felt that was a story that needed to be told, and I instinctively knew the three women who lived it and narrated it were Carole, Joni, and Carly. And I just knew that their songs told that story. So that was how that came about.
Well, I have to tell you, for all of you who I hope get the chance to read some of or all of Sheila's books, they have such depth, such honesty, and if I might say, such humanity in them is what's really got me. So why did you write this specific one about these three? And did you come up with the three? Did you talk to your publisher?
Yeah.
How did this all come about?
Yeah, no, they instinctively, I knew that their stories told our story. And that in the old days, remember, Hawk, you didn't have media everywhere. We listened to one FM radio station. Wow, it was a secret. You bought a 78 or a 33 and you played it at night alone. It was such an intimate relationship. And these were the stories that, I just knew they narrated our journey. So I did a proposal. I'm now going to talk shop talk, so stop me if it's too shop talky. I got a few good sources before doing the proposal, like Jerry Goffin. I got him on a good day, or maybe he was a little stoned.
Well, for those of you who may not know, Jerry Goffin and Carole King were writing partners and
married, yeah.
Got married and had a kid and blah, blah, blah.
Another kid, yeah, all that. So you write a proposal, you put your heart and soul into it. It took me a year to write the proposal. I was doing other things, but also people said, why? I don't understand. You're writing an alternating history. You're not writing one at a time. I said, no, you year by year, I alternate them. I knew it. I just felt it. Sold the proposal. And then I had a little bit of a bidding war. And then you cross your fingers, take a deep breath and think, why the F did I even get myself into this? You go to the representatives. I didn't ask to speak to the people. This is, people always say, oh, did you talk to them all? First of all, having been a magazine writer for a long time, I knew I wouldn't be able to get them all. And secondly, I knew I admired them and I didn't want them to think, oh my God, did she like me? Did Carole like me? You know, that's not what a journalist should do. On the other hand, I didn't want them to think that they owned the work and that they, you know, I was doing it for them. So I just went to their representatives and said, I'm doing this. I have my heart and soul in it. It's respectful. It's admirable. I'm not asking you to find me people. I mean, if you do want to, that'd be wonderful, but I just want to let you know I'm doing it. And I certainly hope, fingers crossed, that if somebody comes back to one of them or to you and says, should I talk to her? You don't say, no, don't. That can happen, by the way, but it didn't happen in this case. Exactly. I can give you some stories.
Well, I mean, the depth of how deep she went, unbelievable. And by the way, I have a trivia question. Somebody Sheila has said she'll send a book to someone if you can figure out where Joni Mitchell went to school. What was the name of the big city that she went to school in? Well, it's not that big, but it's somewhere in Canada. So if you can find out the name of that, maybe you'll get a book. But go ahead. Right. I mean, the depth. I mean, people, not boyfriends and girlfriends, but people that happened to be in her class. Unbelievable how you got these people.
It was fun. It was great. I mean, first of all, let me say, when people were interacting for 2 months, 3 months, 8 years with any of these women during this really, as somebody said, spiritually opulent time, they remember it. They remember it years later. It was an important part of their life and they want to talk about it. But you start by going to the reps and then you just do some digging. And this was before the internet was crazy sophisticated. And oddly enough, they didn't do much on music. But wonderfully enough, what a good thing I had going for me was that the Bible of the music industry, the music journalism, Rolling Stone, was so effing sexist. They didn't even want to look at what Carole King was doing for 20 years in Idaho. They said she married a rancher and she was taking time off. Well, in fact, she had 2 husbands who a Brooklyn girl would never have had unless she decides to be an adventurous. This was her 3rd and 4th husbands. One was like a real bad guy who kind of abused her and she really loved. And the other was honestly a survivalist. Nobody knew this. Rolling Stone didn't think to look. For years, Rolling Stone didn't see all the hints that Joni had dropped about the baby she had out of wedlock and gave up for adoption and could have had her career ruined by that. So it was a great fresh area that wouldn't have existed today. So you find people who find you other people who find you other people, and it's exciting, and you know, doors open. A story that kind of tells it all that's fun to tell is Joni wrote 2 songs for a guy named Carrie. One was called Carrie, and one was called California, and they were in her milestone album, her masterpiece Blue. So
I just got the chills when you said California.
Yeah,
I heard the whole song.
Yeah. And Carrie, she called him a mean old daddy. And he was a guy who like made fun of her, ragged her around, even though she was famous. Nobody knew Carrie's last name. And I stumbled on it. I can't remember how. It was a very weird, accidental way I stumbled on his last name. Again, this was in the days when you could go online and look for international phone directory. And his name is Raditz, Raditz. So I looked up Carrie Raditz, and there were 2 listings outside of Washington, D.C. And I said to myself, this isn't the mean old daddy, who's probably dead now. This is a female psychiatrist. I just could tell. So I left a message at my country house. I left a message for him or for her, presuming it was her, went out and did some shopping, came back. 3 voicemails from Carrie Raditz, a male. When I called Carrie Raditz back, he said, I was waiting for years for someone to find me. Yeah, and we became friends.
Yeah.
So that stuff happens. Joni Mitchell's 2 drummer boyfriends, who I got fortunately before they both died. You just find people, and a couple of people didn't want to or talk to me very hesitantly, and I told their stories. And then when the book became a success, and it really did, suddenly they were all over it. Oh my God, your book. So it's funny. I'll tell you a funny Carole story. She was not happy that I was writing the book. She was very, very private, much more private than the other 2. She was writing her own book at the time, and I did reveal a great deal about her life in Idaho, and I think it was very humane, and I applaud the distance just the adventurousness of her life and the fact that she created herself in so many ways. When she wrote her own book, I picked it up and immediately went to the Idaho chapters, and she used the same sources that I did, said the same things. I was very flattered. And then I realized her co-writer had kind of taken from my book, and that was the best kind of compliment.
But you wouldn't call it, of course, plagiarism. It's just.
It was the best kind. It was the best kind.
Well, I just have a quick story because we're all entertainment people.
Yeah.
But, I was sitting at the Oscars next to Phil Robinson, who used to go with Carole King, the great writer Phil Robinson.
Yes.
And my wife's nephew had just won the Oscar as a sound mixer for, I think it was for Ray, actually. He sound mixed.
Oh, great movie.
And as he was coming back with his Oscar, he stopped to say hi to Molly and I. And I introduced him to Carole King and to Phil Robinson. And his name's Greg Orloff. If he's listening, hi, Greg.
Oh, I remember Robinson. He was the good boyfriend after the other, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
he did.
Yeah, I remember him.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
I didn't talk to him. I remember.
Fields. Any rate,
Yeah.
Greg said, I love winning this Oscar, but more exciting for me is to meet you, Carole King. Thank you for introducing me. That's how much this man thought more of the Oscar than to meet Carole King. So just a quick story that just, wow.
Yeah, no, she's remarkable. And she is, yeah.
Well, she's reinvented herself so many times.
And getting what she deserves now. When I went to her people, her terrific then manager and publicist in 2003, she was still under the radar. Everybody from our generation knew about her, but younger people didn't. And then many things happened. She won all these awards. Of course, she's always been politically activist. So she's getting it from, everybody knows about her now.
Right. And now you have Carole King from Brooklyn, lower middle class area.
Yes.
You have Joni Mitchell from, bum shit, wherever, Canada.
Saskatoon,
and then you have Carly Simon, whose father is Simon and Schuster.
Right.
Different. How did that kind of match up that you have these two people who could write from the depths of wherever they were to a kind of a dilettante?
Oh, she's not a dilettante, but people.
Okay, that's what I wanted you to tell.
Good point, Hawk, because you were in our generation, and she was dissed for that. Remember when it was uncool to have money? She was dissed for that. Oh, she's a rich girl. She's a rich girl. That's funny now in the day of techno billionaires. I mean, it's like very funny. But well, first of all, Carly was great. Carly, our mutual friend, wonderful Tisha Fine, said Carly would be the hardest one to get. I went to her very dear, lifelong friend and collaborator, Jake Brackman, and I was out of town, and Carly left a message on my machine. Sheila, I really love the idea of this book. I'm totally for it. So that really jazzed me up. Carly, all of their stories were different. They were like a triptych. Yes, Carly was from a wealthy family. It was a very complicated set of parents. You have to read the book to see it. I mean, the mother had an affair with a much younger guy. The father had a kind of flirtation with a much older woman. It was a very sophisticated household. And Carly is wonderfully neurotic, and she would say so herself. I mean, she had stuttering problems. She had, all kinds of issues. Each of them went through a lot in their own way. And were very bold with the choices they made, with love, with breaking into the industry, and all of that,
So everybody, I know it's in the book, but I've worked several times with Mr. Beatty.
Yes,
several other people that I think Carly has been with. So can you tell us whether You're So Vain is about Warren?
He's about, and I know this from good sources, it's a combination of three people. One is her high school boyfriend, whose name I'm forgetting now, but he's a writer, very nice guy. One might be her friend Jonathan Schwartz. I mean, in other words, You're So Vain, there's like 3 or 4 people, and Warren is the last one. I'll email you later. I'm sorry to not remember it, but he's a combination. And in a Rolling Stone piece that I found, Carly made reference to the fact that it was a multiple people, but Warren ran with it. He told everybody it's me, it's me, it's me.
Sounds like Warren.
Yeah.
So of the three, and I know you don't want to play favorites, but
yeah.
Is there something in the three as you were discovering that you just all of a sudden went, wow, that informed me, that I didn't know that.
Yeah, everything did. Carole's life stretched such a gamut. And I mean, you can't say cruel about somebody who became a superstar, but after Tapestry, which was the biggest album of the 70s, she was, dissed in a way that I think a guy wouldn't be. For each album after that didn't make it to the level of Tapestry. And one album after another, I mean, critics were, even some that I became friends with, were a little mean to her. I think that's one of the reasons she went to Idaho. She wanted to change her life. But Joni is quite extraordinary. I mean, I think, and Dylan are considered the best singer-songwriters of their generation. She's quirky, she's funny. She won't call herself a feminist. She puts down people. But she's quite extraordinary. And she, again, to put a feminist touch on it, she lived in a rooming house, hid her pregnancy, was broke, went out and did her folk singing night after night after night, existed on donuts. And she could have been, and when she started to make it, she was hiding the fact that she had a baby out of wedlock. Whereas Dylan was pretending he was a road runner, that he was this cool, guy who he was. He was a middle-class Jewish boy from Minnesota. That's fine. But Joni was scared that would ruin her, and it could have ruined her. She had a baby out of wedlock. How horrible. That was a character building, brave, bold thing that she did, going to those clubs night after night, getting more and more pregnant at a time when you weren't supposed to be pregnant, unmarried in Canada. That was an incredibly bold thing she did. Carly, many, many things, including the 10-year relationship with James Taylor. She knew he was an addict. Then he became a methadone addict. She, as Mia Farrow said, she doesn't let celebrity get her. She doesn't use the bolsters that celebrities have. She is, the word I use for her is, she is head forward. She's puts herself out there. She never stopped loving James, even after he wouldn't talk to her. And she feels that she's once said, and it's true, anybody who, if the rules of love are that you have to love only if the love is reciprocated, that someone is taking a piece of your humanity away. And that's the way Carly lived. And that's why her songs are so beautiful.
And now, or at least the last few years, James Taylor is with Carole King doing, I saw him at the Hollywood Bowl last year.
Yes, their friendship never ended. It only got stronger. And some of the awards she got, I think, had something to do with him. Very deep, important friendship. You've got a friend he will never forget. He will never stop being grateful to her for that. And it was just a very close, genuine friendship.
Wow. Well, folks, you have to read that book. If you like music at all, you got to read this book and find out. As I was reading, and she's talking about songs that, to me, and maybe for some of you out there at the home, for our generation, oh my God, she wrote that song, and then I hear it in my brain. It's fantastic. But we're going to have to move on because we've got other people and other things to talk about. Right. You mentioned Aretha Franklin.
Yes.
When we first got on, and I was going to ask you, who were the most important influencers of your life? And is Aretha one of them, and why?
Aretha is one of them. I got to interview Aretha about 4 or 5 years ago. Elle magazine came to me and said, I'm going to give you this assignment that I'm so jealous of giving it to you. I want to do it myself, the editor said. She knew because of my music thing. And Aretha called me at exactly the hour. She didn't have Aretha is supposed to be this big diva, didn't have an assistant call. She called herself, she called me Miss Weller the whole time. She could not have been nicer. And I told her, and we could get into this later when we talk about my memoir, Dancing at Ciro's, but I said something that I was sure she'd heard a million times. I said, Aretha, you saved my life. I was a teenage girl. My family had gone through a great deal of turmoil. My father had sort of excommunicated me. My mother was having a horrible nervous breakdown. I was having a hard time in school. I really wanted to, take my new driver's license and drive somewhere off a cliff. And one day I was driving around and I heard one of your early songs on Columbia, and it just settled me. It just made me feel I could keep going. And I started collecting your records and Ray Charles's. And she said, oh, she was so honestly impacted by that. She couldn't have been faking it. She said, that means so much to me. So that meant so much to me to be able to tell her that. And she was sincere. I mean, I can't believe she hadn't heard it 1,000 times, but my version of it meant something to her. So thanks, Aretha.
Was it Natural Woman or Respect, or what was the song?
No, it was The Sun's Gonna Shine in My Backyard Again. The early songs. Yes, Natural Woman, Carole wrote. Carole wrote the song that was Aretha's favorite. Shows you how multicultural the girl from Brooklyn was. She wrote, and she wrote the Up in the Roof for the Drifters that made me go from Beach Boy Town to New York. Was that the beauty and soulfulness of that music? No, it was The Sun's Gonna Shine in My Backyard Again. And I said,
Be My Baby, right?
Yeah.
I got to work with the Ronettes in England in 1964, and Be My Baby was the biggest song.
Right. Phil Spector. Is he still alive?
Yes. And I worked with Phil Spector, although we never got to. I made a movie called The Idolmaker, and Phil Spector was writing all the music. We had a great soundtrack. Only 4 weeks before shooting, his music attorney said we'd never get the masters, and you better go somewhere else. And we had to run, and we ran to Jeff Barry, who you also mentioned in the book. Jeff Barry and Ellie Greenwich were huge songwriters.
Oh, right, yeah.
And Jeff Barry came in and in a couple of weeks wrote a great soundtrack for the Idolmakers.
Great.
That whole era. So let's move now to three people who, all three of them are still very much in the news.
Yes.
It was called the News Girls.
The News Sorority, actually.
Sorry. And after Girls Like Us became a big hit, were people coming at you, oh, you want to do 3 of these or 3
yes, actually, I just remembered this morning when I was thinking about talking about this. Actually, I got a contract with just by saying I wanted to do it without writing anything, to do a book on Michelle Obama. It was just when he had won over Hillary to be the nominee. And I said to myself, wow, to get a contract without having to write anything, because Girls Like Us was a hit. And then I thought, and I said, I just can't see myself ringing doorbells in Chicago to look for Michelle Robinson's childhood friends. It doesn't feel right. I don't feel that I'm the right person. Whether it was that I wasn't Black, which I think is very, very real, or it was something that it just felt like I just don't think I can do it. Now I have to say, her people were very nice. I mean, this is when he was the nominee, and I got better feedback from them than from some people, but I ended up saying, I can't do this. I gave it up. And with my new agent, she said, look, come on, you did these 3 women, let's do another 3 women. So I was thinking of what field did women really burst the glass ceiling of? And it was news, even though news, TV news is peopled by liberals from Ivy League colleges. There was this incredibly sexist dictum. You had to be a man to do the 6:30 news. First of all, how funny is the 6:30 news now in our era of getting news on your phone 24/7? But it was Cronkite, it was Edward R. Murrow, it was Dan Rather. So I put together Diane Sawyer, Katie Couric, and Christiane Amanpour, and that was another three women book. Again, didn't expect to talk to them for the same reasons, but went to their reps to get permission. And it was a different world. It was a world I didn't know. Some of the people were very corporate, but they told me a lot. I had a little technique. This may be a little too workish this is more J school talk, but I discovered if you give these people their transcripts, they will be very relieved. You're not giving them what you're writing about them, but you're giving them what they said. And they'll be very relieved. And this worked a lot. And the funny thing is, well, first of all, there's some people that indeed I used non-attributed sources. There's some people who said, please don't use my name in this or I'll be fired by NBC. So that was important to know. But a lot of people didn't care if they said something dishy about the women I was writing about, but they would say things like, say I went to Harvard. You know, people want to, people want themselves built up a little bit. So I did that. I went hither and yon. You find great patches. Diane Sawyer's high school in Louisville, Kentucky was fascinating. They integrated themselves. She had a Black boyfriend. I mean, there were things you learned that you couldn't imagine. Christiane was the last person I could get in. Her assistant kept saying, oh, I'm trying to get her, I'm trying to get her. When I finally got her through Katie Couric's old producer, who became her new producer, I got her sisters in England, her best friend in South Africa, and the people who were her running buddies and her teammates in Bosnia, in war zones all across Europe and Asia and Africa. And that really was exciting to me because the other parts of it were a little more corporate, morning news, evening news. I mean, it was exciting, but it was kind of corporate. The war zone stuff was very nitty gritty, and I think it added a lot. So I admire the heck out of them. They would take, you know, they'd have a children's birthday that they had to plan, and suddenly there was a tsunami or, you know, a dictator to interview, and they would put the plans down and hop in a plane. And they really did that, and they paved the way. And now we have all these great, young, adorable, I know you know, I always say they're so cute, they're so cute. You know, serious TV news women, like TV newsmen, who are risking their lives to report on this president. So.
Yeah, no, I have a story. I think I told you the story, but for those out there, Diane, I didn't know Diane Sawyer at all, but I was working with Mike Nichols, and we were flying into New York way before TSA. And, you know, this was I guess the 1970s, maybe early 80s, I guess. And we took one of those 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon flights to New York. We landed at like midnight or 1 in the morning. And as we got off the plane, there was Diane Sawyer, who was doing the news and doing Good Morning America and everything else at midnight, 1 in the morning. And she had in her hand, in Reynolds wrap, a warm bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, just the way Mike likes it, so that as he got off the plane, he'd have a little warm thing and she was there to pick him up. It wasn't a limousine or anything else. She was there. And boy, that showed me a lot.
It shows you a lot. Yeah, she was amazing. People said the most perfectionistic, the hardest worker. She would call you in the middle of the night she just didn't stop working. And when she changed to the morning news, she gave up. She could have, you know, gone in there with higher ratings, but it was, I think, that horrible tsunami we're all in Asia. And she said, I'm not going to not cover this. I'm just not going to not cover this. She was extraordinary, and her dad died early on. She was very Presbyterian. She had or Methodist, and she had a saying: turn your pain into function, or turn your pain into purpose. And she helped a lot of people with that, and she did that consistently. One other thing about her, each of these women had authenticity virtues, all 6 of them. Diane's was, she went to work for Nixon, and she really liked Nixon. She went to work for him after he left. She went to write on his memoirs. She was the last one to leave. All these years later, known as a liberal, you know, newscaster, married to a liberal in a liberal world, she had a million opportunities to say, yeah, I was wrong about Nixon. But there was something about him personally that she was very taken by, and she was loyal to him. And she was honest about her feelings about him when it was politically incorrect to do so. So that was a part of her authenticity that you would see in her interviews with everybody from Whitney Houston to Mel Gibson and on and on. That was Diane.
Well, yeah. And again, the authenticity that I saw, that was a real person. Now, I have another with Katie Couric. My daughter-in-law is an exercise fitness guru who started out with Jane Fonda in the 80s. She's my son Billy's wife. And for 10 years, she was on the Today Show, Fitness, with Kathy Kaler. And she used to get on the ground and do sit-ups with Katie, et cetera. So there's a connection there. But from what I know from you and from Kathy, is there's nobody more devoted and more, why don't you say what you think of Katie?
Well, you said ambitious. People said there was nobody so ambitious. And Katie's wonderful secret was, and Savannah Guthrie used this the other night, the same word was used. She learned it's useful to be underestimated. Everybody thought of Katie as the girl next door, cute Katie, perky Katie, girl next door, sorority girl, and she knocked them dead. Really gave it to Sarah Palin, really gave it to all these shahs and dictators, really gave it to once when she was doing Barbara Bush. Oh, you're lovely, objet in the White House, your furniture, isn't that nice? It's supposed to be a girly interview. She's rolling her eyes. In comes the nice patriarchal President George Bush. Oh, hi, Katie. Are you interviewing Babs about the furniture? And she lit into him about Iran-Contra and Bill Clinton. They stopped they didn't even put the commercials on. It was so good. She ripped him up because she was underestimated Katie.
Yeah, and still doing it. And by the way, you mentioned Savannah Guthrie. Boy, was she, I wish all the moderators would talk.
Me too. Don't we all? I know Susan Page, very nice and everything, but no, Savannah Guthrie, you're not somebody's crazy uncle. Well, he's that too, but you're the president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
was great.
So now here again, here's two, mainstream, Diane Sawyer, ABC, and NBC. But Christiane is like,
yes, different.
She's in the dirt. She's got her feet in the dirt.
She's fascinating. Yes, she's great. Part Iranian Muslim, part English Catholic. The family had to flee when the revolution came. Went to the University of Rhode Island, became best friends with John Kennedy Jr. Came to the CNN in Atlanta when it was, when you had to be blonde. Wear primary colors, have an American name, smile a lot to be on the air, insisted on being on air, was everything that wasn't, that archetype wasn't, wouldn't give up that, desire to do that, became the head of the Frankfurt Bureau of CNN. When CNN was barely anything, then the war in Kuwait started, and she got into that there. When she did Bosnia, there was nobody like her. And there were a lot of great journalists in Bosnia. I did a lot on that. People who died, people who almost died. It was extraordinary. I mean, this was a warfare in the middle of a city. You left your hotel to go to report, and you could have been killed in a minute. And she stood up there at night in her ratty peacoat, as her friend affectionately said, with her messy hair and her sophisticated name and her haughty English accent, all the things that didn't work in CNN in Happy Atlanta decades earlier. And she told us about Bosnia, and she bawled Bill Clinton out for not paying attention. And we learned about this genocide in a country we'd hardly ever heard of. So she did a lot.
Yeah, I've been to Sarajevo, and it literally is a city inside mountain range all the way around, and the Serbs were all up there shooting down that city. It really was, you understand it if you've been there.
Yes, and did a great deal of work afterward, and very feminist work and child protected work in all the countries of Middle East, Africa, everywhere. Tremendous amount of work. Came back to New York. Not everybody fits where they're, and took over the ABC, the Sunday show. She wasn't the right fit. Now she's again doing international work. Very special, very unique.
Okay, so now I ask you the same question I asked about the singer-songwriters. What surprised you about each one of these that you thought you knew, and when you were doing it, you went, whoa.
Okay. Well, there were some funny things, like Christiane, when she went to boarding school in England, said she was a princess. That's kind of cute because it's like something you'd make up.
Oh, she made up that she was a princess.
She made up that she was a princess. I think it's cute because we think of Christiane as being so serious, so very, very, very serious. And that was a cute little thing about Christiane. Katie, again, what she has done for colon cancer is bigger than people know. And we know she got the colonoscopy on TV. Her husband died tragically young of it. But she's funded levels of research, you may know this, that people don't know about. And I think, again, like being underestimated is a balm for her, because her feelings can get hurt. I've heard, I've reported. I think the fact that she's done more for cancer than people know is something she likes to keep to herself, because if somebody's going to make fun of her, do the perky Katie thing, or the Katie's doing too much media, she knows what she's really done. Diane, she was, when she married Mike Nichols, she had an unfurnished apartment. She didn't know how to cook. She had gone to Wellesley, and they made fun of her as the Southern girl, the beauty queen. Oh, all these East Coast sophisticates. Remember, Hawk, how nobody from Beverly High went to Eastern schools? We all went to Berkeley or UCLA, and a few people went to Eastern schools. So these snobbish, sophisticated girls at Wellesley saw her as a Southern girl who was getting these Southern goodies from her parents. But she became the real feminist. She, didn't get, married when Mike Nichols saw the apartment. He said, "Oh my God, you have no furniture." She said, "I didn't want to buy furniture." So very unique, then she learned to cook, I think,
Well,
but
yes.
yeah.
At least bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich.
Yes, she did that. Yes.
And lived their apartment on 81st and Central Park West was up
I'm sure.
had a round, whatever you call
Oh,
it.
Yes.
But
She just was, she was supposed to be the good little Methodist Southern girl, and she out-feministed, and was more interesting than many who put her down. Yeah.
Right. Well, now we're going to get to the book that I found to be most amazing to me. It's called Dancing at Ciro's, and as I said to all of you before, if you have if you were around at all in the 40s, 50s, or 60s in Los Angeles, you may have gone to Ciro's or you've heard about Ciro's, but your memoir was so courageous, Sheila, because you really go into, as you alluded to a little bit earlier, your life. And I mean, we knew each other in high school, but we weren't close friends or anything. And I don't know if you hid what had happened in your life from everybody, but I never knew it, and none of my friends ever knew really what you had gone through. Right. And I'd love to, maybe if you could take us back, maybe to the beginnings. Don't go quite to Elm Drive yet, but maybe how they got going, and tell us a little bit about it.
How what got going? Well, it's really a family memoir. I wrote it about my mother, my father, and my uncle, because it was a very dramatic thing that happened when I was about 12 or 13 years old. But also a history of the Jews coming. LA was a pot of people coming from different walks of life. There were the Jews from Brooklyn to Broadway to Hollywood. That was the ones we talked about. I think your family was one of those too, right? I read Magic Time.
Yeah, my grandparents moved from New York and opened the LA Nut House.
Yeah, exactly.
Not for crazy people. It was for dons and almonds.
And there were Dust Bowl beauties and handsome men that came, and they were cigarette girls and movie stars. There were elegant patrician families, people that came from the East Coast. There were middle-class people that came from the Midwest. So LA and Hollywood was a place where you could start over in the beautiful weather. And of course, Hollywood was Hollywood. My parents, my uncle was had been in the nightclub industry in New York and came out and worked in the Earl Carroll Theater in LA. And then he bought Ciro's from Billy Wilkerson, a very fascinating man.
We know all about him because for years, Chi Wilkerson ran the Hollywood Reporter. And that was Bill's daughter, or wife. I don't remember.
He has a fascinating life. Anyway, and he did a lot of great things. And my father was this incredibly poignant, charismatic man that everybody loved. He was a neurosurgeon. He had a bad heart from childhood. He did the most demanding.
At a time, sorry to interrupt, but at a time when neurosurgery was, really crazy out there. Nobody knew what they were
out there. 90,000 hour operations, people, and it was really out there. Very few people knew how to do it. My mother was a journalist in New York, a snappy New York and Boston writer, came out to LA and became a movie magazine writer, and I benefited from it. I had kind of a fun childhood with that, but it was a complicated story. My uncle became very famous owning this nightclub. He gave Dean Martin and Jean Martin their wedding party. He kind of made Sammy Davis Jr. He introduced people to Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, Kay Thompson and the Williams Brothers. Frank Sinatra had a breakdown over Ava Gardner in the nightclub. It was glamorous Hollywood nightclub, where and the Shah of Iran came and hustled the cigarette girl and gave her thousands of dollars. I mean, this stuff, Howard Hughes, and they were at my uncle's house on the weekend. And my mother was fascinated by that. My father felt he knew he didn't have long to live. He felt what he was doing was more important than this Hollywood world his brother-in-law was in. And my father ended up falling in love with my uncle's wife, who had been a showgirl and all that stuff.
Well,
and
I want to go back a little bit, because you're jumping a little bit with your dad, and your dad did have a problem with his heart. And what I loved is he wanted to go into the army for World War II, and he wasn't allowed.
Right.
And then he ended up going into the Merchant Marine, was it? I'm trying to remember.
He did, yes. I remember getting that documents after all the stuff happened, after my uncle tried to kill my father and almost did. And it was a headline story in the Herald Express, whatever it was called then. My mother had a nervous breakdown, almost killed herself, et cetera, like that, all that stuff. He went to New York with his new wife, the aforementioned former aunt of mine, and took a trip around the world as a ship's doctor. And I found the records. It was amazing finding, when you research people who aren't famous, like my mother and father, you have to dig and dig and dig. And I forgot at this point how I did it, but I found his records of the ship that he went on around the world. And yes, he wanted to do that. He was a romantic. And, we had a tragedy in our family.
I want to go back because I'm not sure that everybody understood it. Your mother's brother, your uncle, married a woman who was trying to faux glamorous, let's say.
Let's say that. I never liked her.
I know you didn't. You didn't like her before.
Before,
And then your father, let me get this right. Your uncle and the woman were splitting up.
I think they were splitting up. I don't think he was an easy man. Yeah.
They were splitting up, and your father, who was unhappy at home, started having an affair with your uncle's
wife. Yes.
Your uncle came, hid out, literally out in front of your house on North Elm Drive in Beverly Hills, and at one point came out and bludgeoned your father.
Yes.
You saw this.
My sister saw it. I was in the house. We had just been taken home from Offang's. Remember the only Chinese restaurant?
Sure.
Offang's. And my sister saw it. And my father almost died. My uncle tried to kill my father. And that's when stuff started really happening. It was very painful for everybody. It was painful.
And you were this was 1958. So you were 12, 13 years old.
Yeah. And then,
go ahead.
Oh no! I laughed when I wrote this part of the story because it was so funny. My mother had like this big nervous breakdown and had shock treatments and all, which were great, by the way. And we took in boarders. They were hilarious. The first one was like a nudist with a big dog, and she would walk around. This cheapskate nudist, Corita Humiston, I think she's not alive, so I'm not slandering her. And as I said in the book, we never really looked to see what the dog was doing toward her body. I mean, she was walking around with this dog naked in the house. Then she had this daughter who was the most exciting thing to me, a beatnik, Marcia, who had an affair with, I forget what actor it was, but they would have fights with each other and throw things at each other. And then there was an alcoholic woman who kind of put a little lesbian thing on me. Anyway, it was hard to have those girls from Hawthorne School come over when my mother was leaving suicide notes, and we had these funny people in the house, and we didn't know where our father was, and my father wasn't speaking to me, and it was hard.
So did writing the book, if not heal, at least help you come to terms with all your childhood wounds?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, I wanted to tell my parents' story because I thought they were heroic and poignant, and I wanted to tell their story. And when you're a writer, one of the best things that can happen is that you find a truth that you can tell, even about yourself, that is embarrassing. I mean, I think when you said courageous, I really appreciate that, because I said things about myself and my own insecurity because of my relationship with my father. Certain insecurities that are hard to admit.
I know, I wrote a book about the same kind of stuff.
Yes. And we talked on the phone. We talked about the people that we thought were cool in high school. Yeah. But it was very helpful. I remember my son, who I really, I don't know if I kind of look up to my son. My son's so great and so cool and really is terrific. And I think when he was in like junior year in Ireland in college, he said, "I read the book. Wow." So and this great.
Had you not told him the story?
He knew it, but he didn't know. Maybe he didn't know the details.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, but so no, it was significant, and I wanted to tell the history of the nightclubs too, and the picture of ye old Hollywood, and I got some great stuff from George Slaughter, and it was a time that was very politically incorrect, but it was cooler in many ways. Like if Sammy Davis couldn't make it that night at Ciro's, George Slaughter and my uncle would go to Chasen's, and they found Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis and said, "Hey, come on, can you do it?" No agents, no big deal. They just came in and took their place. So right. It was that moment that your father probably understood too, right?
We got a question from Bobby Mirish.
Okay.
What years did you go to Hawthorne? I think you went from like 55 to 59, right?
Yes, 50, yeah. 50, yeah.
59.
I went there in kindergarten, so whatever, yeah.
Yeah, we graduated. Bobby, if you're listening, we graduated. I graduated Horace Mann, and Sheila graduated Hawthorne in summer of 59.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. First, I want to talk about your mom.
Okay.
Because you had a very special relationship with your mom, and all the way to the moment that she passed, I guess. Can you talk a little bit about, because after your father was almost killed, you ended up, you were with your mom for the rest of her life.
Well, I wasn't physically with her. I mean, I went to New York.
I mean,
yeah, no. My sister was really around for her. When I found out I was pregnant, I said, I hope it's a boy. And it was, because I said, I don't want that same relationship with it was too close. My mother was very much my advocate. She loved me a little too much, but it wasn't useful to me. I got her, I understood her. She was one of the only working women in that little Beverly Hills group, and everybody was supposed to be a PTA mom and a club member. She loved typing away in her little typewriter and, talking to publicists and laughing on the phone and having all these interesting people funny, wacky people come over. And I was very close to her, and I did sort of take her side in that whole thing. And she was kind of, heroic. She did have, so many people have emotional issues. I mean, she did, have a breakdown, and shock treatments, by the way, really saved her. And those are old-fashioned shock treatments, but it was never really quite easy for her. But she wrote until the very end of her life. She was a National Enquirer writer at the end.
Whoa.
Wrote some really cool stories like John. Anyway, I won't say they're cool, but
they weren't true though. Probably
they were totally true. Like Elizabeth Taylor's. I remember she said when Elizabeth Taylor had her last wedding, she said, if this was just when the Soviet Union was being disbanded, and was Russia again. She said, if the National Enquirer had done as much work on for the Soviet Union as they did to find out about Liz Taylor's wedding, there would still be a Soviet Union.
Uh,
And she would say things like, I know I'm playing the whorehouse, I'm playing the piano in the whorehouse, but I forgot what the last line was. But you can do better than me, or, but I'm happy to get paid. She knew it was like funny, you know, it was like weird work to be doing, but people adored her. People adored her. She used to say, everybody likes, all these young people like me, but you girls. Freddie Prinze Jr. looked at her as his mother. Many people like that.
and you had a relationship. Your younger sister got polio, if I remember.
She did, yes.
And you didn't, and that
I
was a
didn't.
hard thing to understand as an
Yes,
older sister. And
I
you're still very close, I understand.
we're very close. She's a hero to me. I wrote about her in the polio in Airmail, Graydon Carter's Airmail, a number of months ago. Yeah, and I realized in exploring it that I didn't realize how few cases there were then. How few cases. Were you were there then?
Yes,
Southern
I had a cousin who got it.
Yeah, my
Of-
sister Mia Farrow might have been the only two. I mean, there were very, very few cases. There were very few cases in our school. You know, I felt I was the
well,
oldest.
and excuse me,
Yeah,
Joni Mitchell got it.
Joni Mitchell had it, not as bad as she likes to think she had it. You know, my friend Judy Collins had it. Mia had it. Anyway, no, my sister had polio.
But you're
Yeah,
still close with your, is she
we're
on?
very close.
Is she listening to this?
I don't know. I mean, she's private. She's
Oh,
a lawyer and she's amazing. I got
well,
to tell you, when they gave out sisters, I got really lucky.
good for you.
And everybody at Hawthorne loved, and she was like, you know, she had a great time in both Hawthorne School and Beverly High. Big
So
fans.
let me ask you a question that I was asked when I wrote my book about my life with my mother and father. And I wonder if today, if you could today be there with your mom, what would you like to say to her if she was alive today? And what do you wish she could say to you?
I would say to her, I wish I took more of your advice. And I'm sorry that I was snappish to you, but I wish I had taken more of your advice. I would definitely say that to her. And I would say, I'm sorry that when you died, you didn't know that I have this big, and you were so worried about me. You didn't know that right after that, there would be the O.J. Simpson case, and I would have this huge book from it because you were so worried about me. And I'm sorry that I was snappish with you. I mean, sometimes when you're too close to a mother, you need you know, you want the distance. You don't want them hovering over you and asking you questions that you don't want to answer.
It's called a helicopter mom today. It wasn't called.
Yeah, an emotional helicopter mom. Yeah.
It's called a Jewish mom then, I think.
Or something. Yes. Believe me, I've gotten it back to me from my son.
Okay, now a harder one probably is the same question about your dad.
My
If your
dad, yeah.
was alive, what would you want to say, and what do you wish he could say to you?
Well, I wish he could tell me he loved me, you know, that he really did love me, because that when it ends the way it ended, you know, you literally cut off. I mean, he literally suspended my. It really was bad to me when I was a teenager. When you're a teenage girl, you don't need to have your father rip you to shreds like that to really reject you. So I would like, you know, he did say he was sorry before he died, and you know, or that I would learn to see his mistakes. And I guess I would say to him, if I didn't appreciate the work that you did, I'm sorry that I'm sorry that I didn't understand or tell you as much, because Hawk, when I spent those, you know, months and months going through medical libraries, reading the papers he wrote on neurosurgery, you know, finding them was amazing. Finding how much he had written about it, finding how complicated, I mean, I knew it was complicated, but just seeing his earnest medical record, his surgery record, how many schools he went to, how many places he tried to get into. You know, he was competing with Hollywood. You know, he had a big ego and everybody loved him, but he was competing with this Hollywood person and Hollywood life, which he didn't like. So I would say to him, I hope you understand how proud I was of you. And if I was too much of a bratty little girl to show it, I'm going to show it to you now.
Very sweet. I think it's really hard to understand. Yeah, if you're having dinner at Ciro's before everybody shows up, and you see all these movie stars and everybody else, and you come home and your dad is a brain surgeon.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about Frank Sinatra or Sammy Davis.
Right, exactly.
It's about brain cancer, you know?
Yeah,
It's not quite as interesting to a teenage girl.
exactly. Or younger than teenage girl. Yeah, no, I loved going to Ciro's after school. My mother would take me. She would talk to her brother, and I would sit there while they were setting up the tables and watch the rehearsals. And it was fun. I did my homework there.
For those of you who weren't around at that time, where Ciro's is now the Comedy Store. That's where
Yes.
Ciro's was.
There was a huge documentary the other night on the Comedy Store.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Well, the Comedy Store actually is very helpful to us at the Motion Picture Home.
Yes, I bet.
They work with us a lot. And for those of you who want another trivia question, we had one winner already. Let me just find it here. It was who said it? Arlene Middleman. You got the right answer to the Joni Mitchell question. Now, my question on Dancing at Ciro's is, what was the name of the nightclub that was in competition with Ciro's that was directly across the street and that I went to on grad night to listen to Ella Fitzgerald, by the way?
You're asking the people at the
Yeah, don't you say.
I won't give it away. Okay.
If they know what the other nightclub that was the big competition to Ciro's in the 50s and 60s, somebody out there at the home or on Facebook must know the answer to this, I hope. Oh, wait a minute, we might have an answer already.
Oh, we have an answer. Misspelled, but close.
Wait a minute. Oh yeah, Bobby Mirish, again, you won two books. It was called Macombo, Macombo.
Yes.
Bobby, you must have been around then. I remember the Mirish house. Yes, I think your family was in the business.
Sure.
What, Sheila?
No. I mean, that name is certainly a business name.
Oh yeah, no. And Walter is still around at, what is he, 98, I think, isn't he, Bobby? So, now let me ask you, you've done such research with all these other books, and I've talked about your honesty and your humanity. You've got to tell me now, because I want to start researching whatever your next book is, and are you doing it again? If you don't want to tell what it is, are you doing it about three women?
No, I'm not doing it about three women. It might be a collaboration with an interesting person. It's not about three women, but not sure yet. 3 men. That's a thought. I'm open to ideas. Let's put it that way.
Oh, so if somebody comes to you with an idea that
I'm open. Yeah, I have something that I'm working, talking to people about, but I'm open to ideas.
Well, thank you. This has been fascinating for me, and I love re-catching up with you and reading.
Me too.
Books. So I'm now going to ask Jen and Freda and Bob Beecher, our CEO, and anybody else out there who has a question. I'd love to see if we can get some questions going to all. Oh, Walter Mirish is going to be 99 next month. And
he said Peter Lindstrom went to Hawthorne. Not that I know of. I mean, Dee Lee went to Hawthorne, Hedy Lamar's daughter, and
Candy.
Liza Minnelli for a while went to Hawthorne. Both of Rita Hayworth's daughters went to Hawthorne. A lot of people did.
Jen, Freda, hi there.
Hi, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Okay.
I would think that the news women were competitive with each other because they were all working in such a man's world.
Yes.
Did you find that also with the musicians, with Carole King and
that's it, Carole. That's interesting. No, I didn't. I was looking at something different with them. I was looking at their love lives, their, where the songs came from, their personal lives. They all had something to do with James Taylor, so there was a little bit of that going on. But the newswomen were very competitive. I mean, it's a commercial business, morning news, the television money was huge, really, really huge in morning TV at the time and in evening TV. And in fact, when the book came out, and Katie was very, Katie's funny. She's got a funny sense of humor. All right, let's put it that way. And she made a crack about Diane because they were competing like crazy. I mean, for get, as they put it, gets GETS for, and she made a joke and that went viral. The summer before the book, I'm getting these notes from Bobby Mears. The summer before the book came out. And it went viral, and it made it sound as if Katie was accusing Diane of sleeping with people for stories, which she was not doing at all. But from one viral leap to the next, from one place to the next, it made it sound worse and worse. So I ended up, writing the typical essay on, listen, the men were incredibly competitive with each other. The men dished each other all the time. I had a lot of incidents about how they competed with each other, but people don't look at that. They look at women competing, or they did then. It came out before Me Too. Me Too is kind of, we're jumping all over that issue, that women are allowed to compete, and it was very competitive, but in a healthy way.
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
So one of the things that we've been doing over the last 100 episodes of this live variety show is asking people what their favorite films are. And I would love to find out what yours is, but I have a couple of other categories that I want to add on to it because I think that would be really interesting.
Okay. My favorite is? Oh God, I can't think. I can't think of a favorite. My favorite movie ever. I'm not one of these people that watches movies over and over again.
That's okay, and you can change your mind tomorrow. But like right now, what do you think? Like you're in the mood for this movie. What would it be?
I like Michael Douglas movies. How's that? I like 90s Michael Douglas movies. This is just off the top of my head thing. We were watching something the other night. I mean, all these things are now streaming that would have been releases in theaters. There was a Sienna Miller and Alec Baldwin movie that had interesting, weird touches in it. But I said to my husband, that's like a 90s Michael Douglas movie. So I am not a, all the great movies of Orson Welles. I'm not a movie intellectual, alas.
Okay.
I'm a
Phyllis. A 90s Michael Douglas movie would have been Basic Instinct.
Basic Instinct, of course, the one with Glenn Close. And what was the one what was the great one?
Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction. But there was a scene in a kitchen and somebody really good played. Was that Basic Instinct? No.
I think that
Basic Instinct was anyway. I
Bob
like,
Mears.
yeah.
Bob Mears.
Bobby Mears is helping me a lot. Yes. I don't really I can't think of a favorite movie. I'm sure I'll think of one after we're
Stone was the 80s, Bobby.
Right. Yeah. So I'm gonna say Fatal Attraction because that fits that bill, and I think the kitchen scene you're talking about is in there. Okay, so the variation on this, which I think will be interesting from you, is what is your favorite song?
Okay, well, I don't really have a favorite. I mean, I love Laura Nyro songs. I really do. I had a birthday the other day, and my sister did a wonderful, funny little thing, and she started out by singing Stone Soul Picnic. So I love Laura Nyro songs. I think of the songs that I wrote about in Girls Like Us, the one that was the most iconic and the one that summed up the women of our generation as young women was Both Sides Now by Joni Mitchell, sung by Judy Collins. And Judy's a friend of mine, but I loved it. I loved her version and knew what was special about her version way before we became friends. But I think that song is, if you want to know what it was like then to feel that way at that time as a female, that was a song.
Excellent.
Beecher, are you there? Where's Bob?
Bob had to log off. Bob, as you know, is the CEO of MPTF. He's kind of busy right now.
Yes.
I understand. Okay, well, anybody, you got to get somebody to call in.
Yeah, if you're watching from your home right now, please feel free to call us at 1-221 if you've got a question for Sheila. Bob, I know that Bob Mirish, I know you're watching on Zoom, but you can absolutely call us right now as well at 1-221. The other thing I was going to ask you was, had you not gotten into journalism, what other career path would you have wanted to pursue?
That's good. I often think, why did I get into this? Came to New York to go into sociology at Columbia, and I don't know if I said this, but I kind of regretted over the years that I just kind of walked out to become a waitress, because that's what we all did back then. That's good. That's a good question. I mean, everybody now is in business. It's interesting how these young women are entrepreneurs. I mean, that's a word we never heard 30 years ago, and now everybody's an entrepreneur. Something to do with, I don't know, maybe public relations, something, I like to connect people, something like that, maybe. Academic, maybe I would have stayed in sociology.
The interesting thing about public relations and about journalism is, and I think what I've gleaned so far from the limited amount of interaction I've seen, you are one of those people who it is in keeping with, I don't have a favorite movie. You like to have that 10,000 foot view of everything and see it kind of as a collective. That's, I think, why even with PR, it's not about a specific thing. It's about, getting the whole story out.
I wouldn't have said PR a few years ago. I would have looked down on it. But I think, I mean, communications is a very big thing. And now, I mean, we're living in an era where there's so much good being done, and there's so many, there are more organizations, don't you think so, Hawk, that are doing good, that are foundations, organizations. I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, we're meeting a very horrible moment in our country. A horrible leadership situation by doing what we can to offset it.
Yeah, there's a Bob Beecher that just sent me a which hopefully you guys will see. Just amazing piece by Jennifer Hudson and the guy from Black Eyed Peas.
Yeah.
Called Love. And you just see how many different groups and how many people are all looking for unity and love right now.
Right.
And there's something else going totally the opposite way. And like, it's not there. It is not there. And it bothers me because there are so many people. To me, it's like, think of like the freeway, and we're on the 405 and it's totally jammed because there's an accident. And I think once we get past the accident, I feel like the freeway is going to open up and everybody's going to be out there enjoying, being who we are and what we want to be and what we've believed ever since, we were kids and believed in America.
Yeah. We need
Molly Jordan has a question.
I actually made Molly Jordan able to be seen and ask the question directly.
Oh, okay. Hi, Molly. There's Sheila. That's my wife, Sheila.
Oh, hi, Molly.
Oh, Molly, we can't hear you yet.
Unmute yourself.
I did it. Go ahead, Molly.
Okay. I was all my apologizing that I wasn't prepared to be on camera, if only I'd known. But anyway, I did have a question for you, Sheila. I understand now why Hawk has been so enthusiastic about you, because you're so accessible and real and genuine. And I can imagine people opening all kinds of doors for you when you want to write. But my question for you is, because you explained so well, and when you were so up close to the razzle dazzle of Hollywood back in the day, and it seemed like there was so many interesting things, there were so many interesting things to write about. I'm wondering what you think about Hollywood today and what is interesting about it that might be worth writing about.
Well, I did a lot of profiles of celebrities, somewhat recently, actresses, actors. I did a piece for Vanity Fair on the making of Thelma and Louise that was one of the best pieces. I was happy to do that. I actually might be doing something on another movie that might be coming out. I can't talk about it, but there certainly are a lot of terrific journalists who are covering Hollywood. And I know also it's like all the other industries, it's very challenged by the, social distancing and all of that. I know a little from my sister, who's an outstanding Hollywood, entertainment attorney, how challenging it is. But there is a movie that I hope to be writing about, a little bit. But I think, the women in Hollywood changed even before Me Too. There was a revolution of the women in Hollywood. It happened before the Weinstein thing really kicked off Me Too. I think feminism in Hollywood really happened in a very important way, and it's still and it's happening everywhere now. But what do you think? You guys are closer in. Hawk, what do you think?
Well, I'm kind of very sad about Hollywood actually today because forgetting COVID and all the things that are bad because of COVID, I'm just upset because I don't think we can make the kinds of movies that we made when I was, in the middle of it. I mean, when you think about the 70s, Godfather, Conversation, Chinatown, Marathon Man, movies that I got to be in, Rosemary's Baby.
Right.
And even the 80s, I mean, I don't see somebody making, Ferris Bueller.
Yeah.
Or Romancing the Stone, or,
right.
Or Basic Instinct.
So there's another movie, I'll think of the movie with the kitchen, but anyway.
But, or Kramer versus Kramer, or Ordinary People. I mean, they're being made on there's less and less of them being made on a much smaller scale.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've dumbed down our audience, and it's our own fault.
Yeah, there's some movies that we've seen on TV that were like, where did this come from? We never remembered it being released, and I guess it was one of those immediate to streaming, like Jennifer Aniston in something called Cake. About 2 years ago. It was great. She was terrific.
Yeah.
You'll find
small distribution. Nobody saw it.
Well, it was great. And we find things like that. And the Sienna Miller one the other night, and a few things like that. And I guess they're all, right to streaming now.
Right. But
sorry. Small fun fact: Cake was part of Cake was filmed here on MPTF's campus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the pool. They used the pool for one of the scenes.
But I know from my friends who are, deep in it, still trying to get movies made, it's just harder than ever. I think, in the 70s and the 80s, the people who ran the studios were movie lovers. I mean, they might have to, if they had 20 movies to make, 12 of them made financial sense and everybody had worked for all the quadrants, et cetera. But there were 8 films of that 20 that somebody said, my gut says, I got to make this movie. It may not make any money. And that was Godfather. And that was Chinatown.
Right.
And that was Ordinary People. And I just don't see that happening anymore.
Oh, sad. Yes. I couldn't understand that.
Now, I just remembered one other question that I missed earlier. You talked about the Girls Like Us book as your happy book.
Happy.
Yeah, were the other 7 unhappy books? Or?
No, the OJ book was a trip. That was amazing to get the access I did when nobody else did on the story that everybody was covering. It was my happy book because I had a vision for it. And I think it worked out. I wanted to tell a generational story, and I think I instinctively knew they were the ones that their work was the ones to tell it through, while also doing the cultural background, and I got people to talk to me. It wasn't people remind me, they said, oh no, you were worried at the time. Well, I don't remember. I was doing a lot of magazine stuff at the time, so that kept me worried as well. But even when Carole told people not to talk to me, they did talk to me. I hope that, I don't want to keep saying this about Carole, but I think I did her justice in the book. And, I hope that at least people around her feel that way. I think they do, no matter what she feels. But it was just, people wanted to talk. People wanted to share their stories. Music is very special. Those women were special. The World's, Laurel Canyon, other areas were special. And and it got a great reception. People still tell me they loved that book. So
Okay, so
Yeah.
Molly asked a question about Hollywood. I want to ask a question. You've been in New York for a long, long time.
yeah,
And the Apple to me, if I'm up 24 hours and I land in New York, I can't go to sleep. I got to go do something in New York. Have you seen the changes in New York for the good or the bad over your years as compared to what it used to be?
you do and you don't. I mean, you get older, so you see a different part of it. We've lived in the Village for a long time. It's really still great. I mean, it changes, it changed, but some of the stores are the same. This is a challenging time for New York. This whole pandemic has been very challenging. It's a city with lots of people in it. We have mass transportation. I'm looking at what he wrote. And it's you see people everybody walks around with masks on. I mean, it's everyone's doing it right here. So I hope that we're able to not have the surge that they're saying we'll have.
Okay, Jen, are you there, Jennifer and
I
Freda?
sure am. I'm here.
Bobby asked the question, is the book on campus? And I don't think, I think that Sheila said she would send a book to the motion picture home.
I will do that. Yeah.
And I don't know if we can get Girls Like Us still in print or not?
Oh, you bet. You please buy it. It's in paperback on Amazon. We
Okay,
always
and-
Definitely take care of that.
yeah.
And the news story also, the news story?
New Sorority is as well. And if you want Dancing at Ciro's, write to me because they have hardly any at Amazon, and I will make some offer. I have some copies of it. I don't know why it's complicated. I wanted to get the rights back. They wouldn't give me the rights back, but people have said they tried to buy it and it's ridiculously overpriced. So, send an email to Hawk and he'll send it to me.
Did
Right.
you ever, did anybody ever want to make a movie about Dancing at Ciro's?
No, but we could talk about that. Somebody can. We have a little friend on Facebook named Merlis. No, Merlot. Anyway, I'll write you later. A nice man. Merlin. Anyway.
Merlot, I think, is a wine, but I don't know.
Yeah,
Jen, you have something to say?
I was going to say that I'm sure we'll get some copies here. We're going to get copies for the people that guessed the answers correctly or answered the
Yeah.
question correctly. And we'll put some out in our little prize zone for the next 100 episodes of Organized
Oh, good,
Chaos.
great.
Sheila, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much fun I had today.
Good, I
hope you did.
do. I'm
And
going
I
to send
hope-
you an email.
I hope our residents did. So thank you so much for being here with us. And everybody, thank you. Congratulations again, Jen, on 100 episodes. And Freda, thank you for being the help that you are to me. You really, very special. Thank you.